Okay, 42 minutes off your marathon in 4 months. What if I told you that a 43-year-old husband and father of 3 children just ran 2 hours and 53 minutes for the marathon after running 3 hours and 35 minutes in December? No shortcuts, no secrets, just the right mindset, the right plan, and complete buy-in. This video is about one of the runners that I coach, and I love it because it's everything that this channel is about. In December 2024, he ran 3 hours and 35 minutes for the marathon. We started working together on January the 13th, and last weekend on Sunday, May the 18th, he ran 2 hours and 53 minutes for the marathon. And no, he didn't suddenly double his mileage or relocate to Eton in Kenya and live like a monk. In fact, his average weekly mileage was 55 kilometers per week, which is 34 miles. But he is one of the most coachable, consistent, focused people that I've ever worked with. And I want to break down exactly how he made this transformation so that you can learn from it too. This was the first message that he sent to me. Hi Lee, after commenting yesterday on your video, I decided to write you a message as well. As already mentioned in the comment, I'm 43 years old, married, and have 3 great kids. But unfortunately, got obsessed with this marathon thing not so long ago. Now, as you can see there from the message, he's also been a tennis coach before at a very, very senior level and still works as a tournament director for the ATP. Again, dealing with the best tennis players, the best coaches, the best athletes in the world, in the tennis world. And that's very important and very interesting for me because I got to coach somebody who is used to working with very good players. But what it meant from him as a runner's perspective is he's relatively new to running. He knows what he knows, and he knows a lot in tennis, but he doesn't know a lot in the running world. And so he submitted to the process and had complete trust in me as a coach. Incredibly important. And what he said in his first email to me was brilliant. I love it. I've been on the internet for the last 2 weeks since my run, but all the solutions I found were more of the, we'll coach you to get it done and you'll get a PB, but take it slowly and try to get 10, 12, 15 minutes faster first. Now, I might be a bit crazy, he says, maybe even unrealistic or insane, but I believe in anything being possible with some borders if we really commit to it and put the work in that's needed. I really don't know if I can run a sub 3 hour marathon, but I believe I can. And the only way to find out is to push those 19 weeks and see what happens on May the 24th race day. He would like to start on January the 13th, which we did, a 19-week plan, where the marathon I'm planning to run is on May the 24th. Actually, we ended up bringing it forward a week to May the 17th. If it's possible, I would love to integrate the Budapest Half Marathon on April the 13th as part of the training, as that is 6 weeks out, and it would be a good test whether I can run 85 to 88 minutes-ish for the half marathon, which would indicate that the sub 3 hour marathon is possible. But for this, I love this part. I absolutely love this part. But for this, I'm sure I need some professional advice and from somebody who is actually accustomed to doing unrealistic things, to pushing beyond average. This is how I found your YouTube channel. Now, you cannot not read that and get excited about it. He's ran 3 hours 35 for the marathon. He knows he's capable of more, but he doesn't know how much more. He doesn't know if he can run a sub 3 hour marathon, but he's already thinking, what do I need to do along the way in order to make that possible? And he's working back from that day of the marathon, working back to a half marathon and trying to run and figure out what time he would need to run in that race to make this even more possible. And of course, when somebody's trying to do unrealistic things, illogical, unreasonable, irrational, sign me up. I'm a big believer that people stay safe in whatever they're trying to do. It doesn't matter whether it's building a business. Usually they don't build a business because it's too scary. They stay in work, they stay in mediocre lives because they're scared of failing. And for me, if you embrace failing as part of the process of success, you are already a winner. And Attila has understood that since being a kid. To be anywhere near the top of the tennis world, as a coach or as a player, you need to understand that failure is part of the process. By the way, whilst he was training for that 3 hour 35 marathon in December, his original target was 4 hours for the marathon. And then he started training, readjusted that to 3 hours 45, readjusted again to 3 hours and 26 minutes, and then ended up running the 3:35. And as I've said a couple of times recently about failing forward, and failure has happened to a lot of runners that have recently done Boston, London, Manchester, hotter conditions. What do? I failed miserably. Where can I go from here? They set a rational target because they need to come back and not fail. When in actual fact, it's been a curveball day, and so we can fail forward and still push on. One of the big things that stood out was, of course, his coaching background, and then he's managed coaches, but worked with some of the best players and coaches in the world. And so one of the questions I asked him right off the bat was, what's the difference between a good coach and a great coach? And that's a difficult question to answer, but immediately he gave me an answer. And he gave me 3 different reasons, 3 different differentiators between a great coach and just a good coach. But one of the key points is it's got to be individual towards the player or towards the athlete. Now, let me just say for a minute, I was called arrogant recently after a video that I'd made about the world record being quite weak, the 100K world record, when it was 6:13 being quite a weak record, and I wanted to be the one to take it. I don't think that's an arrogant thing to say, but people got offended by it, and still working out whether part of that is true, and actually there is a little bit of arrogance to me. Similar to this athlete, to this runner, Attila, I think there are layers to confidence. And very simply, on your bottom layer, you've got people, let's equate this to running, you've got people that look at marathon runners, for instance, or any runners, and say, oh, they can do that, but I can't. And that's how quite a large portion of people operate. Then you've got people who, oh, well, there are people running marathons, and therefore I can run a marathon. It's just about figuring out how I actually do that. And then you've got the layer of people that I fall into and this athlete falls into, which is very similar to that second layer. You know that it's possible for some people. So if somebody's run a 2:20 marathon, it's possible for me to run, if that's a North American or a European or Caucasian or however you want to say a non-African, it's possible for me to do that. I just need to figure out how to get there. So very similar to the second, but just the aiming higher. Exactly the same with Attila. But what is the differentiator between those 2 levels is the level that I'm in, I know that I need to fully commit. I know that I need to go all in and go for it. Otherwise, there's no chance because it's aiming high. Now, there's a layer beyond that, which I'm fascinated by. And it was discussed in the book Relentless by Tim Grover. And it discusses your Michael Jordans, your Kobe Bryants, your Tiger Woods. And they don't even need to have seen it done or know that it's possible in order for them to go for it. And they will give every fiber of their being, everything to make it happen. And in the process, they are more than willing to fail because, again, they have that deep understanding that in order to achieve greatness, which they did, they're going to need to risk failure along the way. What Attila had was he was realistic to know that he's 43 years old. He's got a wife, 3 children, he's got commitments, he's got his work. He's only got so much time that he can dedicate to this project. And he also understood there needs to be a gradual build. We couldn't just say to him, okay, you've been running 20 miles a week for the last few weeks, and therefore you're gonna be running now 100 miles a week. You're gonna do all these big sessions. You're gonna add 10 different things. And if you survive the next 16 weeks, the next 4 months, you will run the marathon in a fast time. That's not the way to go about things. But what he understood deeply was you can have confidence that you can do something. You can know that it's possible. People have run sub 3 hours for the marathon. We know it's possible. You need to believe that you can do it. And that's what the training program is all about. We need to build that belief to get you to the start line, for you to genuinely believe that you can execute from start to finish the pace that you need to run in order to get your goal time. Because if you don't believe in yourself, you don't believe in the training process, when the doubts start to crawl in, and they will crawl in 25K, 30K, 35K, 22 miles, 20 miles, whatever you want to say, it's going to amplify those doubts. And at that point, the excuses build within. Unless your belief is rock solid, the excuses will grow and build to a point where it's easier for you to step off the road and say, this is not for me, or today wasn't for me, or whatever. or I need to slow down and not hit target. If that belief is rock solid, it's so much easier to execute. And how can you not love that about him, that he just purely rejected incremental gains? I've been on the internet for the last 2 weeks since my run, but all the solutions I found were more of the, we'll coach you to get it done and you'll get your PB, but take it slowly and try to get 10, 12, 15 minutes faster first. He just wasn't interested in that. And he just saw that if I'm going to train towards a marathon, I'm going to fully commit and get the very most out of my body whilst respecting where I am at the moment and what I can get to. And that together with, well, I know a lot about tennis, I know a lot about coaching on that side, but I know nothing about running or very little about running. So I put my faith in you, I put my faith in the process. That is incredibly easy to work with. And so when I gave him a recovery run of 30 minutes, and that's exactly what he did several times a week, recovery run, 30 minutes. It wasn't, oh, is this enough volume? Is this too short? He just did it and made it happen. Remember, we're trying to do something pretty special here within a 4-month period. And I think a lot of runners and a lot of coaches, they aim at volume as a target when it should be a byproduct of the running, of the sessions you're doing, of the rest of the running. If you're starting from, let's say 20 and you're trying to get to 100 and you're going after 10% per week gradually, and that's your goal, the volume, it's going to take you a long time to get there. And I don't think it's going to be the most efficient way for you to move forward. And the key in this case is, I want to run one more marathon. I want to run it as fast as I possibly could. I want you to help me to get there in 4 months. And so we built from where he was. And that everything starts with a really detailed setup call. And we go into detail about what's looked like so far, the rest of your life in sport. Is there any sporting background? What did that look like? What does the last 8 weeks look like? What's the rest of your life? Family, travel, children, work, business. What does the rest of your life look like? And how can we fit something that is individual to you based on what you've done so far, but what your potential is? And then how do we safely get you there? There's no point just piling stuff on and you don't make the start line because you did too much. He was the perfect student. And so when we did that test half marathon a few weeks out, he was in great shape to run significantly faster. But the job was to do it as part of a long run, and that middle part, half marathon part, is at marathon pace. Very difficult to be disciplined in that situation. In a race situation, when you've got your half marathon, you're going to run significantly faster, you're going to run a PB for the half marathon, and you could go significantly faster than that. To be able to say, okay, I trust the process, and I trust that this is the job to do today. And the reason for it, or part of the reason, is so I can continue training next week as normal because I'm only interested in the bigger goal of that sub 3 hour marathon. And in that half marathon, he ran 1 hour and 27. Way beyond his personal best for the half marathon. But what it would indicate, if you take a step back and look at that, 6 weeks out, you give that time to most people, you put it into a calculator, and it'll come out with double the time plus 7 to 10 minutes. What about if the athlete is on an upward trajectory, if he's moving forward and constantly improving, and we've still got to milk out more in the next 3 to 4 weeks? What should be the suggested time then? There is no calculator for that. He understood from that point that we are trying to make better by 5-10% minimum every single training session that we do, and the big sessions especially. And so we get into those big sessions, we're executing as well as we possibly can. So he finishes that half marathon, understands the importance of recovery at that point, and get into that next session fresh enough to be able to execute it 10 out of 10 execution. Not 10 out of 10 perceived effort, but 10 out of 10 execution. When you not only believe in that process, but entirely kind of submit to the method, it is extremely powerful. If we're trying to move forward by 1% every time we do a key session, and we're trying to compound those improvements over time, with 6 weeks to go in a 4-month block, you're still moving forward. Another thing that he did brilliantly, which you could take away from, if you just take away this, it's going to make you a better runner, is he understood that the training process was to prepare him to run as fast as he possibly could in a marathon. And as I've said, completely trusted in that. What you cannot control is the conditions on the day. And so, as we've seen recently, it might be hotter. It might be colder. It might be slippery because it's rainy. What he did, because of his lack of experience in marathon racing, he wrote down everything that could potentially happen within the race. And he wrote down his reaction to what he would do in that circumstance. So if it's too hot, if it's too cold, if it's this, if it's that, it's got a plan for it. And that's the best that you can possibly do. You can have the greatest training program, the greatest execution of the sessions. All of a sudden, you get, and it's just not happening. Whether it's the conditions outside, whether it's the weather, humidity, whatever might happen, it might be something internal. You might have picked up a bug on the way to the race and not be feeling great. Happens all the time, especially if you're traveling through airports and going internationally. If we try to control the uncontrollables, we're going to go mad. And so we can't do that. We've got to control what we control. Even with sleep, just said, if you can bank as much sleep as you possibly can in the weeks leading up to it, in the days leading up to it, get to a point where you don't need to sleep the night before that Sunday morning race and you will still run a PB, that's a great place to be. And more often than not, what happens is you end up having a great night's sleep the night before too. And that's exactly what he did. It's something he could control, and he controlled it. And then the Thursday before the Sunday race, we spoke. And one of the things we spoke about was pacing. You got to bear in mind that this was a moving target, and it was moving pretty quickly because of his progression over the training. And then the race came on Sunday. He did exactly what I asked. And he just listened and executed. And he ended up running a personal best for the half marathon in the first half. And in the second half, running another personal best for the half marathon and coming out with 2 hours and 53 minutes. All of these things he mentioned in his message: crazy, delusional, insane. I've been called illogical, unrealistic, a dreamer. This wasn't a miracle. And when I talk about my own journey, people very quickly brush it off and say, oh, well, you're gifted, or your genetics are great, or whatever. They're not. This is exactly what happens, nothing to do with luck, nothing to do with a miracle. When you work with the case that you're working on, and you have a plan, and you listen and you execute that plan, if you have an athlete that is focused and completely believes in the process, you can do incredible things. He made a 42-minute PB. That's 1 minute per kilometer faster in a 4-month period. So what does it take to take 42 minutes off your marathon time? And moving forward, how easy would it be to find that extra 18 minutes and within a year period, be able to take an hour off your marathon time? You have to have the willingness to be coached. You have to have the willingness to reach out for help and say, I don't know what I don't know, and I want the guidance to do things consistently well. You cannot be average in this thinking. You need to be totally committed to the process. When I started training the right way, and after 3-4 years of kind of fumbling around and continuing to improve, but not at the rate that I wanted, once I started working with the right people, it's just like a light comes on. And I had exactly the same questions as Attila. The only questions, or the only time he questioned me was, is it really this easy? Am I supposed to be going this easy? I had exactly the same question. And it's because you equate to go faster, you must train harder. The input, output, and therefore more input, more output. It's just not the way. And when you add into that full-time job, wife, children, family, husband, work, business, whatever else, personal travel commitments, it gets complicated. I promise you, it's insanely simple when your only job is to get faster. I had that for 10 years, more. And you could go out and destroy yourself in an interval session in the best meaning of the word. And then your only job for the rest of the day was to sleep, eat like a horse, sleep again, and then lie on your back and read. How are you going to manage to do that and enhance the recovery in that way when you've got 12, 14 hours of commitments on top of your running? And I'm absolutely I'm absolutely buzzing for him. He deserves it more than anybody. And I love working with this personality, and it just attracts. And so on a daily basis, I'm inspired by these people who are willing to fail and go for it and achieve big things. And knowing that if they do fail, it's on the way to something much bigger. So well done, Attila, and you are a rock star in my eyes.